Hello and welcome back. This is Robin Hawke from Inspired Spaces, your qualified interior designer. Today, with the current status of virtual lockdown, I thought it was appropriate that we started talking about creating your ideal home office and school room. So I thought to make it easier today, we'll go through a series of images and slides that points that you can actually take down yourself and consider what you need to do to create your space so that the kids don't drive you crazy, so that you actually get productive work done and you come out the other end smiling and laughing with each other. So the very first thing we need to consider when we're designing our own home office or schooling room are things such as furniture, noise, flexibility, comfort, communication, lighting, temperature, and air quality. Every single one of these elements are really, really important. But I suppose what jumps out at me most at this point in time is probably noise transfer and communication techniques. I think we've seen on Facebook the number, or social media, the number of people who said that they're trying to do a confidential meeting with a client or with their boss and the kids screaming in the background that they need to go to the toilet or something like that, is a big issue. You need to set up some rules around those really important meetings that you're doing and that the kids are in the no-go zone. Communication as well. How are we going to communicate between each other? You know, some of you will have to wear headphones so the others aren't being interfered. In fact, maybe all of you will be wearing headphones. There's also issues of who's going to have access to the computer if you've only got one or two computers per household and you're not fortunate enough to have several per person. Another thing is flexibility. I think people have to be flexible about where they work, but it's important that your flexibility isn't trying to work on the computer, laying on the floor. You'll end up with back problems and neck problems, etc. So there's the things that we do in general that you need to consider. And in particular, the most important part is get yourself a room. If you can find a space within your home that you can make as a dedicated office or school room, your life will be so much easier. Now, I know some of you won't have that luxury, and we'll address that in a moment, but at this point in time, if you do have the luxury of having a study or the ability to create a room into a study, here's some of the key points that you need to consider. Make sure you have adequate storage and bench space so that the books can be put away. The things you don't need at the time can be put away. Ideally, have shelving to keep the desk clear. Between the entire family trying to work, there will be books everywhere, there will be laptops, there will be files. So have something that you can get it off the bench top, and floating shelves are an ideal option for that. Another thing is, where possible, try and give yourself a view to the outside. They have proven that if you can see the outside, especially trees, it will decrease your anxiety, it'll decrease your concerns, and it'll also lower your blood pressure. So if you can do that, that is wonderful. If in fact you can't see view to the outside, or a lovely view outside rather than build high-rise, they've also proven that if you use an image of nature, the effect is still the same. If you don't have the ability to take a bedroom and convert it into an office, or you have a room that, you know, the theatre room into the office or dining room into an office, other options are to establish zones within the house. So, for instance, you may have an area that maybe, if you have an outdoor pergola, that's the area that we do our arts and crafts, and you'll have boxes full of that stuff out there. You may have an area that you go, okay, kids, I'm doing an important phone call at the moment, and this is where you'd be doing the quiet business calls, and they're not to interrupt you. You may then have to use the dining room, and maybe you'll insist on a clean desk policy in the dining room once you finish today's work or the schoolwork, so that at least you feel like you're moving away from the space that you're in, that work environment. And I suppose at this point in time, the advantage of, I need to point out, the advantage of actually having a separate room is the fact that you can close it and walk away. So you know that this is the end of my work day, this is the end of my school day, this is time to be with the family, do activities, do some exercise, watch TV together, play some games together. Other alternatives, not ideal, especially if you've got young kids, but you may actually have to resort to desks in bedrooms. I know that's not ideal for younger kids because you want to be able to watch what they're on the net, etc. But for your teenagers, etc., set them up as a proper desk in their bedroom if possible. And if all else fails, pull out the fold-up table, and that can be a designated work area. I've actually included here an image of a room divider. Now this one's quite clever because the whole idea of closing off the space. So if you set up the dining room, for instance, as your work area and you want to close it off, you can put the room divider up, and that way, in this particular case, it's a storage for books, etc. It then again delineates, this is my work area, this is my home area to do. Right, so one of the key things is you found the space. Now, this is a client's office, and I know she won't mind me using this as an example, but one of the very first things to do once you find that spot is to get rid of your clutter. How can you work in that space with no desk space that's available? So declutter, make sure you have task lighting as well. It's all right to have general lighting, but you'll often need the task lighting to get better views. Otherwise, you're going to get eye strain, especially for those people who aren't used to working on a computer all day, every day. Ventilation is another key issue. You don't want the room too cold. You don't want it too warm. Too warm, you'll fall asleep. Too cool, you won't be able to concentrate. And one of the best feng shui type hints is try not to have your office set up so that your back is to the entry door. It has a sense of insecurity. You don't work as efficiently because you're always worried about someone coming behind you. This is something subconscious, and they've proven this to be quite effective. So if possible, try not to have your back to the entry door. As we said, remove clutter. And if you're using a bedroom, if you've taken that spare bedroom out, for the next few months, consider removing the wardrobe doors and fitting them out with shelving or storage boxes, something like that. Again, what it does is empty out the space for you to work with, less clutter within the room, and it gives more of an office school feel. And just put the doors in the garage and put them back on at the end of this period of time. Now, so what are ideas here? So I've now put up a couple of mood boards for you to consider. And you want some colour, you want something that's going to encourage you to want to work into that space. So some of the key things is to add texture and colour. That could be through a nice throw rug. You don't have to spend a fortune. You can get one for a couple of $100s. Put that down. Make sure you add some colour in the form of art, pops of colour in the form of artwork. Create some of your own artwork. I've given you some hints and tips in creating your own artwork. Put it up. Makes you feel good. It makes you smile. Make sure that you have plants, ideally fresh plants, I mean live plants, because they are helping the oxygen levels in the room. However, even fake plants make you feel better. Give yourself the rug not only for texture, but to help to reduce noise transfer. So with 3 or 4, 5 or 6 people in the house trying to do work at the same time, the noise transfer is going to be great. So things such as textured finishes actually absorb the noise and stops the transfer of noise. Give yourself adequate lighting. And we said before, it could be task lighting, general lighting, but make sure you have it there. Allow somewhere to sit and have somewhere to put your coffee. So have your desk, have an easy chair, have somewhere you can actually sit, read a book, read that report, read to the kids. And it gives you a sense of achievement and purpose. Now, if you're in the position that you actually can afford to get yourself a proper desk, do so. Now, I put an example of this one because even though it's official office desk, it still doesn't look like your typical office. It actually gives you a sense that it's a little bit more homely and fits in. Probably the main key here, if you're working from home on the computer all the time and the kids, is you have a really good ergonomic chair. Now, in this particular example, it's a proper office chair. However, you can get ergonomic office chairs that look a little bit more like dining chairs, and that will probably fit better in with the home decor. Now, if you don't change the room, things aren't going to change. So as Frank Lloyd Wright says, the space within becomes the reality. If you don't change the space in which you're working, then you are not going to be productive. And I think it's summed up by this quote by Scott Weber. When you open the door to a space, does it give you permission to act differently, other than behaviourally conditioned to sit and stand and deliver? If the space doesn't give you permission to change, then it's too easy to revert back to what we know. So if the space that you're working in doesn't give you permission to be in work mode, you won't be as productive. If the space that the kids are going to learn to study in doesn't give the feeling of a space that's conducive to study, it's not going to happen. So they were my quick tips on how to create a home office or a home schoolroom. So key is make sure you have a designated area, ideally a room that you can close off, but it's always not reality. So create zones, try and hide it by using ward dividers or create invisible thresholds. Make sure you have adequate lighting, make sure you have adequate ventilation, and most of all, make it as pretty as you can, because you say never judge a book by its cover, but in reality, what encouraged you to open that book in the first place? Its cover. What's going to encourage you to be productive as a worker, as a student, or as a parent who's homeschooling is the space. If it's inviting, if it's pretty, you're going to want to use that space and you will be productive. So this is Robin Hawke from Inspired Spaces. You can find us on inspiredspaces.com.au, on facebook.com/inspired spaces, or instagram.com/inspired spaces AUS. See you soon, and with more tips and hints on how to survive the current crisis.